So we are going to start this evening with Kristen McKnight. She, like I said earlier, she's from Pittsburgh. She is recently married, so give her a little bit of razz about that. She's a school teacher and is probably one of the craziest people I've met last summer, and that's great. That's why we invited her here. All right, so please clap and welcome Kristen McKnight.
Please chill here and mess with the audio as much as you want. Hey guys! Can I get a quick thumbs up scale? How are you guys doing tonight? Okay, wow, look at you guys, amazing. I am an elementary school teacher. I do that kind of group manipulation on a daily basis. It's a really quick and easy way for me to not have to do a lot of work and for you to all think that I care about you. And I love my job, I really do. I even like most of my students. You can care about all the kids, right? But you can care about your health and still hate the Stairmaster. Right? And you know the Stairmaster deserves an equal education. But the Stairmaster is never absent. And that's because the Stairmaster's parents also find him unbearably annoying. So they will send him to school with a 102-degree fever. But that's fine, because that's why all elementary schools have nurses. So that there's a room to send that kid to as like a holding cell before their parents are mentally prepared to come and get them. And honestly, the Stairmaster can come up to me with a paper cut. Like, oh, Miss McKnight, I got a paper cut. Go to the nurse. But don't you just have some Minions Band-Aids? No, seriously, this could be an infection. You need to get out now. And then, if your favorite kid comes up to you, we'll call him the Bowflex, right? And he's like, oh, Miss McKnight, I got a cut. It's really deep. You know what? Just grab a wet paper towel, wring it out real good, put it right on there. You're going to be fine. Right? Miss McKnight, my arm got cut off. You know what? Wet paper towel, wring it out real good, put it right on there. You're going to be fine. Right? You got to keep those guys strong, right, to keep the natural selection going on. And I'm not a medical professional, but most elementary school injuries can be resolved by a wet paper towel. A lot of people tell me, oh my God, kids are so cute. Your job, oh my gosh, you're a teacher, that's adorable. Kids are gross. Kids literally put everything in their mouth. And then the minute that my mouth is open and I'm within firing range, they sneeze directly into my mouth. And then last week, Arnold puked on my new flats twice, so now they're just my ew flats. And all I got out of that, thank you for that, guys. Thank you. All I got out of that, though, was missing my prep period because I had to get his homework ready because his mom's going to take him home because she thinks he's got the stomach bug. That or the 12 packets of ketchup that he put on his pasta at lunch. That could have been what caused the vomit. And then there's Harry. Harry is practicing writing his name on the wall in the bathroom. But we don't keep markers in the bathroom, so Harry's had to get a little bit creative. And I know what you're thinking. How did she solve the case of the mystery poop writer? Their handwriting is very recognizable at this age. I only solve crimes involving vomit and fecal matter. I'm like the Nickelodeon version of Law & Order SVU. And this kind of stuff would not happen at Goldman Sachs, right? Could you imagine? All right, guys, the quarterly reports are out. Jerry, did you get a chance to go over that strategic advisory plan? I don't know business words. No, I couldn't. Raymond puked on my loafers this morning. Was it the cookies at snack time, or was he really sick? I don't know. When I talked to Jason, he told me to just put a wet paper towel on his forehead and call his wife. All right, good work, Jerry. All right, we're gonna play a brief game of hide and seek after the briefing. Not it! That kind of stuff just doesn't happen. One of my least favorite things about working is meetings, because meetings are the worst. And I think it doesn't matter what profession you're in, meetings are the worst. When I was a kid, I used to think about meetings, and I used to think, like, oh, it's so cool. All these adults who are like sipping coffee and solving problems. That is not what happens in meetings. Usually it's like a 45-minute meeting where everyone's getting really fired up about something that you don't remember what it's about, and then you solve nothing. And sometimes, guys, you leave meetings with things like this. Okay, because I'm not kidding, I made this in my faculty meeting today, okay? I don't know what the meeting was about, but now I have this. So everything worked out. We had a meeting last week because Timmy's been acting out. Timmy thought it would be funny to change Jack's name on his desk to say Jack-ass. And I was mad. I mean, everyone was mad. And I'm sitting there thinking, Timmy didn't pay attention in my compound words lesson. There's no hyphen, Timmy. You're better than that. Don't worry, I talked to him. Kids shout out a lot in class. I was teaching a lesson on the long O sound, and I know it's been a while since you guys have been in elementary school, but that's whenever a word has this sound, O. And one of my students said, "Hey, Miss McKnight, do you smoke cocaine?" I was livid. I kicked him out of class, I emailed his mom, and I CC'd the principal. I said, "This child is 10. How does he not know that you snort cocaine and you smoke coke?" At least he was paying attention though. Honestly, like, getting kids' attention is like the hardest thing for a teacher to do. That's when we come up with all these little, I have some teachers up here, we come up with all these little ways to get kids' attention, right? Like 1, 2, 3, eyes on me, or clap twice if you can hear me. Thank you, teacher's pet. But I'm trying to figure out why that stops at elementary school, because could you imagine if the Senate gets out of control and then all of a sudden Mitch McConnell throws up the silent coyote? Right? Or like Nancy Pelosi, clap twice if you can hear me. I think at this point I may have painted a great picture for you about how my job is not cute and it's not adorable. It can be pretty stressful. And then pair that with the fact that I am a classic overthinker and crippling hypochondriac. Because I am. I was looking up hazmat suits on Amazon. You can get the good ones for $31.40, but you can get them as cheap as $9.48, and they come in multiple colors. And I realized I might have a problem, so I think I've come up with the greatest solution ever. I've married a doctor. He's right there. And I'm so sorry, because I really don't think you knew what you were getting into. Because he would get home from work, and I would greet him at the door. Like, I would see him pull into his parking spot, and I'd be at the door. "Hey, babe, how are you? How was your day?" "Probably great, right? Listen, can I get AIDS from a Target box?" I called him once from the bathroom of a bar that my friends and I were at, and I said, "Hey, it's me, just calling to check in and say hey." But on a more serious note, is there such thing as secondhand snorting? Because I was definitely near it. But I didn't physically. But I'm feeling a little hyper, and that's pretty normal, but just had to call to check. He came home one day and he said, "Oh, I'm in a great rotation right now. I'm really enjoying it. In fact, I think I'm going to make a future career out of it." And I said, "Oh, that's great. What is it?" And he said, "Infectious disease." And I was like, "Oh, wow. That's so amazing." But also, another idea is like proctology, right? Because guys love butt stuff, right? He's great though. He always gives me advice. He says, the best way to get over your hypochondria, to kind of get over that stuff, just find something to do that will make you relax, get your mind off of it. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll just start running. But I'm a terrible runner. I'm very bad, and I give up very easily, and I didn't like the snarky looks and the judgy looks that I was getting on the Capitol Crescent Trail, so I started wearing a knee brace. You can buy them at CVS, and they don't need a doctor's note or anything. And then I would wear my knee brace, and all of a sudden, all the other runners were in solidarity with me. Like the faster runners would fly fast past me as usual, but this time their fist was in the air, and they were like, "You go, girl, running on an injury." And I'm like, yeah. I had pedestrians stopping the old folks in wheelchairs as I went past the nursing home, being like, "Can't you see this girl's got a knee brace?" And I would like hide around the corner of a crosswalk, waiting for enough cars to show up so that I could press the button and then hobble across, waving to the heroes that were letting me go. Yeah, and Bernie's right. I mean, I am a little crazy, and that's a little crazy. All the stuff that I've been talking about tonight is a little crazy. But that word crazy is so intense, so I prefer to use Webster's Dictionary's second definition of crazy, which is extremely enthusiastic. Because that's what I am. I'm extremely enthusiastic. And I come from a long line of extremely enthusiastic women. Like my grandma. She's 90, and she recently thought about retiring, and then decided that she didn't know what she was gonna do if she retired. So she's still a real estate agent, 71 years strong, and she's amazing. She's lived quite a life, but sometimes she says things that kind of make you do a second take. Like when we were sitting in her breakfast nook one morning, and we were talking about the flowers for my wedding. And I was saying, where should we get them? Where should we go? And she said, under her breath, "Well, if all else fails, you can always go to a graveyard." So naturally, we all wanted to hear a lot more about that. And it turns out that she was in a women's society for which she and her friend Jean, or no, it was Dee, her friend. She only has two friends, Jean and Dee. And it was Dee. They were the ones who were supposed to bring the flowers for the events, but they would often forget as 90-year-olds do. And so one morning, my grandma just pulled into the local cemetery and paid her respects to, I don't know, Bartholomew Jones, and then promptly took his fresh flowers and went to the event. Because according to Grandma, the nicest and freest fresh flowers are at the local cemetery. So later that day, we ended up getting snowed in because she lives in central Pennsylvania, and you tend to get snowed in. Central PA, nice. She lives in Hollidaysburg. Yeah, amazing. Her name's Virginia. Do you know her? Maybe. Okay, cool. Tell her I said hi. So she says there's not much to do in my grandma's house. She doesn't have internet. She doesn't have televisions. She doesn't have much except for like some Cheerios and some Gatorade. And so she said, oh, I have a great idea. Let's go through my mail. Cool! But it's not just one day's worth of mail. No. Grandma's inner hoarder has been resurrected when you go through her mail because you have to bring armfuls of mail from her bedroom to the living room, and it takes a while. It's mail and it's other things. So we're about a couple hours deep into the mail pile. I found like a slightly used sandwich bag, and she said, oh, I'm sure I kept that for a reason. Okay, put it in the save pile. And I found this envelope, and it was addressed to my grandma's address, but not to my grandma. And I said, Grandma, what's this? It looks important. And she said, oh, don't worry about that. So I opened it. And it was like legal documents of some sort for some land in West Virginia, and there were some scratch marks on the side. She had called the local sheriff's office, and she very quickly and spryly sprung up from her seat, snatched it out of my hands, and said, I don't want to talk about this anymore. So at that point, I was pretty sure my grandma did a murder. And she said, why don't you go make us some tea? Which is exactly what a murderer would say. And then I started thinking, oh my God, did she kill Bartholomew Jones just for the fresh flowers? And what was the sandwich bag for? So naturally, I took the rest of the mail, shoved it back in the closet, closed the door, and went and made us some tea. Because it's best not to pry. So the apple doesn't fall far from the tree with my grandma, because you really know where you stand in my mom's world based on her Christmas list. Because she's had the same piece of paper since 1989 that has the names and the addresses of the people that they send their Christmas cards to. And upon closer scrutiny, you can tell that some of the names have been crossed out, like Grandpa, who died in 1991, or, Uncle Jeff, who died in 2007, or Terry, who died in 2014. There's literally one that just reads, and Sally McKnight, because Sally's husband died. So now it's just, and Sally. And I'm like, all right, Mom. So I'm going through the list, and I look, and I'm like, oh my God, Bill and Sue died? And she didn't even look up. She just said, oh no, we just don't send them cards anymore. And I'm like, oh, so they're just dead to you? Extremely enthusiastic. And that's the blood that's coursing through my veins. And someone thought it would be a good idea to put me in charge of children. So that's all I have for you guys tonight. But you guys have been wonderful. Thank you so much.